Jacqueline Pollauf. A few years ago, I wrote a book called Pedal Exercises for the Harp. And as you might guess from the title, this is a book of exercises, all focused on drilling the pedals of the harp. Since it's been published, I've had a few questions about how I work with students when using this book. So what I wanted to do today was take a few different exercises from the book as an example and play them for you and go over what I have students kind of tackle in their approach to these exercises. So the book has 40 exercises total. I'm just going to play a few of them for you today, and I'll give a little introduction to each one, explaining some different areas to focus on. And I'm also going to do a split screen so that you can see my hands playing and my feet moving the pedals at the same time for each exercise. Now the book is meant to be used incrementally, meaning that each exercise builds upon the last. So you start with number 1 and work all the way through to number 40. And the exercises become increasingly complex as you go. Each exercise is focused on a specific skill. There are subtitles that explain what the skill is. So I'm going to start with pedal exercise number 1, subtitled Left Foot, Flats and Naturals. So all that's happening in this exercise is your left foot is moving between flats and naturals. And part of the reason that the skills are so clearly kind of delineated throughout the book is that way you can see if there's any areas of weakness. So some students might find it really easy to move the pedal from natural to flat, but might have more trouble going back from flat to natural. So the first thing you want to do with any of the exercises is to check and see if there's any area of weakness and try to smooth that out so all of it feels equally easy. Then the other thing that I have students do for all of the exercises is to see if they can make their feet really quiet, to make sure there's no clunking noises or anything coming from the pedals themselves. And then to think about the timing, so when they're moving the pedal in comparison with when they're placing and playing the strings. So with pedal exercise number 1, I'm going to start with my right foot on the floor because it's not being used. And then I'll have my left foot ready and waiting on the B pedal, as that's the first pedal. And then as I go, I'm going to make sure that my pedal is always moving in 2 steps, so out and then up, or down and then in, to keep a really quiet pedal, no clunky noises catching the wood down there. And then I'll also think about moving the pedal between the first and second notes of each measure. Exercise number 10, subtitled Right Foot Moving Between 2 Pedals, Flats and Naturals. This is all focused on the right foot, still flats and naturals, but now there's a lot more moving around between pedals rather than staying with the same pedal for an entire line. And this is to force you to really know where your pedals are just by feel. Sometimes students try and take a little peek to see where their feet are or what position their pedals are in. But everything with pedals has to be done without looking, completely by feel. So by moving back and forth between all these different pairs of pedals, you're really developing a strong sense of which pedal is which and which position they're in. For exercise 10, I'm going to start with my pedals all in flat to match the key signature. And then I'll keep my left foot on the floor since it's not being used. And I'll go ahead and put my right foot on the A pedal since that's the first pedal change. Frequently, the A pedal is further away than people think. A lot of times they put their foot up and land on the G by mistake. So making sure you're on the A pedal itself. And as the exercise goes along, of course you want to think about making a nice clean pedal so that you're not catching the wood or making any clunky noises from the pedals themselves. And then also in this one, there's a lot of moving back and forth between pedals. So as soon as I move a pedal and make the change, I'll go ahead and move my foot to the next pedal that's needed. And the goal is to try and do this really efficiently, just going straight from one pedal to the next, not stopping by any pedals on the way. And as far as timing goes between the strings and the feet, I'm going to always try and move the pedal just before I make the change. The changes are not evenly spaced out in this, which is on purpose, so that you don't get stuck in the idea of just thinking of changes rhythmically, say always moving a pedal on beat 1, but instead that the changes are linked to the note in question, the note that requires the change, so that the pedal always goes with that note wherever it happens to fall in the measure rhythmically. Now we're going to look at pedal exercise 16, subtitled Pairs, Simultaneous Sharps, and Staggered Naturals. So in this exercise, both feet are working together, and all the pedals are moving between sharps and naturals. And every time that the pedals move to sharps, both feet move at exactly the same time. And every time they move to naturals, the feet move independently, so one foot and then the other. And the two big things I think to think about are that when you're going to sharps, when the pedals are moving as a pair, that your feet are moving exactly the same time, that there's no delay between them. That can be a little tricky to get your feet to really move right together. It just takes some practice. And then when you're going back to naturals and the feet are moving independently, a lot of people get mixed up as to which foot is moving first, the right foot or the left foot. And the way this is written is that there's not a pattern. Again, that's on purpose, to force you to really think about it, which foot moves next. If you have a copy of the book in front of you, you'll have noticed that there are no printed pedal markings. And I spent a long time trying to decide whether or not to include these. In the end, I decided not to for two reasons. The first is that for students learning to play the pedal harp, learning to mark pedals is part of that process. So the first thing most harpists do when they get a new orchestra part or a new solo is to sit down and mark their pedals. And with the absence of printed pedal markings, the student can practice how to do that. Usually I just ask students to mark the pedals for the next exercise, and then when they come in for their lesson, I check their markings as well as going over the exercise with them. The other reason is that there's such a variety of a way to mark pedals. So some people mark in English, some people mark in solfege, some people put the right foot on top, some people put the left foot on top. And for an exercise book, I thought it was important that people be really deliberate about marking the pedals in the way that they prefer. For myself, I think it's important for students to be able to read pedals both in English and in solfege. So usually I have them alternate. They'll mark one exercise in English and then the next exercise in solfege, so that they're really flexible with the way that they read and mark pedals. For exercise 16, as I mentioned before, it can be kind of confusing when you're going back to natural, whether it's the left foot or the right foot. So I think it's important that you have your pedals really clearly marked in this so you know which way you're going. As I play this, I'm going to move the pedals after I've placed the chord, but before I've played it. So just in the moment, right before I play the chord, I'll go ahead and move the pedals. And then thinking, as I mentioned earlier, about trying to have the pairs of pedals be really a pair moving at exactly the same time. exercise 21, combining sides, switching between flats and naturals. So the sides refers to your right foot and your left foot. Both are going to be involved here. And then we're switching between flats and naturals because for the most part, you're starting with one pedal in natural and the other in flat. And then they're going back and forth. So basically this one is just a lot more mixed up than some of the earlier pedal exercises. It's not as straightforward. And throughout it, I think there's all the usual things to think about. Trying to have nice quiet feet. Moving the pedal just before you play the string in question so that you don't have any unexpected or dissonant resonance from your strings. And then also always trying to have your feet prepared for the next change. In particular, when you get to the end of each line here, you want to be looking ahead to the next line and getting your feet set up for that line. Exercise 32, pairs, simultaneous opposite directions. So in this exercise, you're starting with your feet both in natural, and then one is moving to sharp and the other is moving to flat at the same time. Then they go back to natural, and then they move the other way. A lot of people find this confusing at first. It's hard to get your feet to go the ways that you want them to go. Usually I try to think ahead, so I'm already feeling my foot wanting to move down a little bit, my other foot wanting to move up a little bit. So that way my muscles are ready to go in those directions. Also in this one, I would think about trying to replace your fingers and then move your pedals just after that. Also trying to think ahead so that at the end of each line, you move your feet so they're ready and waiting prepared for the pedals on the next line. And then finally, thinking of course about trying to have quiet feet so that even though they're going in opposite directions, they're still equally silent. This video and gotten some good ideas and tips for working through the book, Pedal Exercises for Harp. Now we just looked at 5 exercises today, but there are 40 total in the book. So there are many in-between ones that fill in some of the steps that we jumped over, and also some that cover pedal change scenarios that we did not go over today. And my hope is that for students working through the book, the kind of systematic way that all the pedal changes are laid out prepares them for whatever sort of pedal change scenarios they might find in their repertoire. And that by drilling everything so extensively, students set up really good habits and they have very quiet, smooth, and precise pedal changes.